I hope that you took some deep breaths and looked out your window kind of longingly at the outside world and were very patient. So thank you all. So as a starting note, the first thing I want to do is mention our sponsors. We don't spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to mention we want to thank Lightstep, Blameless, Bridge Crew, Launch Darkly, New Relic, Serverless Ops, and Transposit. You all know how it works. Sponsors make the world go round. So thank you all for hosting. Thank you to the mods, and thank you all for being here. I am so excited for our next talk, y'all. And I think you're really going to like it too. Our next speaker is Mia Moore. Their charity is Austin Pets Alive, which I looked at the page for, and it looks seriously delightful if you're into pets. And I asked a series of questions to the speakers, and Mia, one of them was, what is your favorite chore to do, like on your island? And Mia loves watering flowers, and they are absolutely right. I also love watering my flowers, but I do yell at the watering can quite a bit. The title of Mia's talk today is Building Virtual Community. So without further ado, please everyone give a warm virtual welcome and applause to Mia Moore.
Thank you so much for that wonderful intro. I'll just get up to the podium here. I'm going to do my very best to do Animal Crossing and my slides, a little bit of everything at once. When I got the question about my favorite Animal Crossing chore, I mentioned to Austin that I wish more of my chores would make things sparkle after I did them. It would be great if I could do the dishes and they would sparkle, if I could vacuum the floor and it would sparkle. That's one of the reasons it's my favorite. So just thought I'd throw that in there. Thank you so much for the great introduction. Thank you to Austin for organizing this and for this being your brainchild. This has just been such a delight. Happy birthday. I cannot believe it's your birthday. Like, what a great way to spend a birthday. I'm so excited to be giving this talk today. So a little bit more about me first. Hi, I'm Mia. My pronouns are they and she. Either one is fine. You can find me on the internet pretty much everywhere, but mostly on Twitter at @XOMiaMoore. I actually designed this hat late last night, and it's a little IBM bee. So if you want the IBM bee, it'll be on the swag or it'll be on my Twitter. But yeah, I think it's really cute. Turned out really good. I am one of those people who immediately, when we found out that we were going into quarantine, I shaved my head. Kind of the exact opposite of some people whose hair is too long. But I was like, this is the one time I can get away with it. And, if it looks bad, no one has to know. Luckily, I'm happy with it. But my Animal Crossing character has pink hair, so I thought it would be good to note that I usually also have pink hair. So currently, I'm a developer advocate at IBM, but in all my past lives, I've been a content marketer, I have been a social media manager, I've been a community manager, and I have an MBA in digital media management. I'm really passionate about what makes folks connect with the community, especially online, because I've been in online communities for most of my life. I've also been playing Animal Crossing since 2004, so you can imagine my excitement that I'm giving a talk in Animal Crossing and that everybody has been picking up Animal Crossing during this time and during this quarantine. So a little bit about our goals today. When I was deciding what kind of talk I wanted to submit, my first thought was immediately something around community building, because Animal Crossing is really a game all about building a community. The game rewards you for being a good citizen of that community and making sure that the community thrives. So here's what we'll be covering today. First, we'll talk about what is community building. Then we'll talk about some tips for being a strong community leader. We'll talk about moving from an in-person community to a digital community, or creating a digital community from scratch. We'll talk a little bit about tools of the trade, and we'll talk about being a good digital citizen. So even if you're not someone who wants to run a community, I still have some tips for you on how to be a good community member. So I'd say right now, we're all finding ourselves in a very similar situation to the beginning of Animal Crossing New Horizons. All of a sudden, we're on a remote island of our own. We may not have our team, our communities that we're used to. We don't have nearly as much human interaction as we once did. Luckily, though, we do have a lot of life's modern conveniences. I, for one, am very grateful for the internet, without which I think it would be a lot more difficult to go through this time. But without in-person events, meetups, and interactions, it's crucial to make sure that we are creating or maintaining these digital spaces for human interaction. Having human interaction is important. And I think the more isolated we've gotten, the more we begin to see how important it really is. I'm about as introverted as they come. And I know even I've seen a difference in how I feel not having that human interaction. And I do want to say that these tips apply to any kind of community, not specifically DevOps. So, especially during this time when your normal, even friend group or family group can't meet up as usual, you may be able to apply these tips to anything. Do you have a Dungeons and Dragons group that regularly gets together? Why not make it virtual? Why not do it in Animal Crossing? Sky's the limit. So, first, let's talk about what is community. So, community provides a means for people who are connected by a common need, geography, or interest to interact with each other. So, this can be as simple as buying the same product, so a community based around a brand, or maybe you're looking for answers to a programming question and you join the Stack Overflow community. A community allows members to share knowledge, experiences, empathy, and more with each other. This is how communities provide value to their members. And notably, they can be virtual or in person. And both of these have pros and cons. Just think about the difference between your neighborhood association or next door. Both of them are based on your geography and it's based on being physical neighbors. But I, for one, don't really know my neighbors in person, but I do know them on Nextdoor. So pros and cons, like I said. Community building is a little more specific. So that is community building is creating, maintaining, or encouraging a space for a community to interact. And the big message I want to send home here is that it's led by individuals, not brands. So brands have a specific voice and a specific message. Individuals, it's a lot more about trust, about building that relationship between individuals. Trust is crucial to building a strong community, and it's a lot harder to build that with sort of a faceless brand than it is with an individual. The other thing is sometimes this is a job role. A lot of companies hire for a community builder role, but it can also be voluntary. So if it's not part of your job that you're getting paid for, you can still be a community manager. The biggest point I want to drive home, and if you remember nothing else, I hope you remember this, is that community building is about providing value through connection. So the connection is where a community's members get the value. It is your place as a community manager to encourage that connection and ensure your members are getting that value. Okay, so you've decided that you're a community manager in one way or another. Let's talk about what's next. First, maybe you're used to a face to face community and you've decided to move to digital in this time. Don't worry, I got you. So, first, I want you to think about how your community provides value. Is it the conversations that you have? Was it networking with people? Was it sharing resources? Was it icebreakers? Was it playing board games together? How can you replicate that value digitally? The next is I want you to think about where are your members already spending time? It makes sense to go to a platform that they're already at rather than having them learn something entirely new. We'll talk a little bit more about tools in a second. The next thing is understand that things will be different and that's okay. Sometimes limitations really push us to be more creative. So even though they'll be different, that doesn't mean that they'll necessarily be worse. Some things may turn out better than before. And I want you to learn from the experiences you have trying to create a digital community and adapt and make it stronger than before. So I recently went to a meetup from the Austin DevOps group that's normally an in-person meetup, and they decided to switch it to virtual for the time being. And I thought it was really interesting. They did their agenda as usual. The talks were great. I had a really great time. But afterward, one of the organizers put out a blog post detailing what they learned and what they're going to change for next time. And one of the things they mentioned is a big part of their in-person meetups is who's looking, who's hiring, where people stand up and they say, I'm so and so, I have this skill set, and I'm looking for a job doing those things. Or someone says, my company is hiring, we're hiring for these things, talk to me about it later. They found that by doing it in a Zoom call, people felt a little bit too anonymous, like they weren't sure who was there. What if my boss is here? What if my coworker is here? It almost didn't feel like a safe space to stand up and say, I'm looking for a job. But recruiters were also fine with standing up and saying, hey, I have a job opening. So they decided to switch how they do that for next time. I think that is such a great example of really taking note of how your community is interacting and making sure you adapt and make it better the next time. So if you're creating a community from scratch, I wanted to put the screenshot in there because it can be a little bit awkward, especially at first. um, the first thing you really need to do is you need to find an opportunity. So you may feel like there is a gap. There's not the right community for you. Maybe the ones that you've been a part of are not specific enough, or they aren't run the way that you would run it, or there's something missing. Definitely do your research first, because you may find that that community that you're looking for actually already exists and you could be a part of it, because running a community is hard work and I'm sure that they could use your help. So do your research first. The next thing is, don't assume you can do it all by yourself. I would advise you to partner up with a couple folks, because it's a lot easier to split that responsibility and to make sure that you're not the only voice in that in the community building. You have some other perspectives as well. On that same note, you want to welcome collaboration from community members. It's really important to make sure that you're not just building a community for you by yourself in a vacuum, but you're building something that other people are interested in too. That's what makes it a community. And just like I said last time, iteration and feedback are key to making the community strong and thrive. All right. Have you ever tried to build a bridge in Animal Crossing after you did all your terraforming and then it told you, hey, there's no river here, even though there is a river there? Sometimes you build something and then later you realize that it just isn't going to work, right? Tools are very similar. The big thing here is, so this isn't a tools talk. I'm not going to give you too many specific examples because there's 1,000 tools out there. Each tool could have its own talk for sure. But I want to give you some things to consider before choosing your tools. The first thing is to make sure you're choosing your platforms and tools with intention. So that means I want you to consider the functionality. There's do you need one-way communication? Like maybe you need an email newsletter for announcements. Do you need video or voice chat? Is your audience tech savvy, or would they rather use something that they already know how to use, like a Facebook group? The next thing is the tone and the culture of that tool. So the example I like to give is the difference between Slack and Discord, which is the classic work and play dichotomy. Slack presents itself as a workspace. It's for coworkers. It's for collaboration on projects. Discord has its roots in the video gaming community. So it's definitely more about play. The vibe of Discord is just a little more casual. All the welcome and loading messages are fun and playful. And Slack has a little bit of that too. But even the terminology, you're in a workspace, what is your job role, things like that. It just has a different vibe to it. So if you're trying to build a more casual community, maybe Discord is right for you. But maybe you're working with your coworkers on building, I don't know, a book club or something like that. Maybe you just want to make a Slack channel in an existing community because you know that they're already there. You also want to be aware of the current user base, the existing user base. So what that means is think about is already using that tool and who already knows how to use that tool. We want to avoid having people have to learn a new tool just to join a community. The next is to beware of shiny object distractions. So you've probably heard this before. I think we've even mentioned it in some of the previous talks today, but we're really bad about that, especially developers. I think we get really excited by new tools. I think we get we want to try the next big thing. We want to make sure that we are on top of it, that we know what's going on, but make sure that it's a right fit for you. You want to avoid cycling your community between tools over and over again. So you don't want to start on a Facebook group and then decide, oh, I just heard about this thing called Slack. I think that makes sense. Let's move everybody over to Slack. And then a couple years later, Discord comes out and you say, oh, I think voice chat could be really cool. And you move everyone there. It's a lot better. If you need that different functionality, I don't want to discourage you from thinking about that. I just want to make sure that it's a fully thought out thing. And just because you're the community leader doesn't mean you get to move everybody over the next time you see a shiny thing. Interestingly enough, I think during this quarantine, a couple of people have gotten back on Elo, if anyone remembers Elo. I definitely made an account and I've been getting some notifications that people are liking my posts from 2016. So you don't want to be have all these dead communities and all these different tools and platforms just because it's shiny and it's fancy and you think it's a new and exciting thing. So let's talk a little bit, excuse me, let's talk a little bit about being a good community leader. I think a great thing to keep in mind is, what would Isabel do? For those of you who don't know, Isabel works in your island. She works at the town hall, and she ultimately helps you to improve resident experiences and the town as a whole. She has a really infectious, kind, and positive attitude, and it really makes the player want to create a better town. I think she's an excellent example of a good, strong community leader. So a couple tips we can learn from Isabel. First, create a code of conduct. So either a code of conduct or rules. You need the rules in place so people know what is expected, what they should and shouldn't talk about, the sorts of language that they can use, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that in your code of conduct, on your website, within your community, that you use inclusive and welcoming language. This is one of those things that could also be its own talk. It can be hard to do on your own if you don't have, well, not all of us have a diverse, wait, let me phrase that again. Even the most diverse among us do not have every possible perspective in the world, right? So it helps to get an outside perspective. There's also tools that can help you make sure that your language is inclusive to everybody. You want to make sure that you value the community's input, but you also have some final decision makers. Some things will never get done without a push from you. It's kind of like building a bridge in Animal Crossing. You may decide where it goes, but if you wait for the community to donate bells, you would probably be waiting for the rest of the game. You need to understand that helping others betters the whole community. That culture of giving and collaboration makes us all stronger together. That is, again, that's the value of a community. You need to solicit and listen to feedback. And more importantly here, I want to point out that you should try to solicit diverse feedback. So not just listening to feedback when you get it, but also going out and making a conscious effort to gather feedback from your community and from people not in your community and try to figure out what gaps you have. And finally, keep an eye out for bad actors and make sure that you're enforcing that code of conduct. So being a good citizen, I think this is equally important to being a good leader. The first thing you need to do is make sure that you are following the rules. It is okay if you want to call out injustices or unfairness in a community, but try to do so in the way that the leadership has set up. If you have a code of conduct or rules, there should be a way to give that sort of feedback. The next is to assume the best of people. Especially digitally, I think it can be a little more difficult to convey tone and intention. So if someone says something that you don't agree with, try to default to empathy and see if you can't cross that bridge and communicate a little bit better. You may find that what they're actually saying is something that you agree with. They just said it in a way that you didn't understand. The next thing is to show effort. This is so easy, especially digitally, to forget to show up in time, energy, and effort. You want to make sure that you are visible, that you are participating, and also that you're putting in the effort before you get to the community. So a great example is if you have a question about something, instead of saying, hey, what is X? Make sure you Google that question and you research what you can and you show that you did that work. Clarify your question enough so that people don't just think you're using them as a fancy Google search. The next is to celebrate successes, not just your own, but everybody's successes, because a success anywhere in the community is a success for everyone. And the last one here is to give to others freely. I took this from the Buy Nothing project because I just think it's such a great rule. Here's what they say on their website. Keep in mind that all gifts must be given without any strings attached and without any expectation of reward other than the joy of giving. It makes your community so much stronger to give out of the joy of doing so versus expecting anything in return. It really makes sure that everybody's interactions are coming from the heart. And it's such a two-way street. I feel like you truly get what you give in a community. Just like in Animal Crossing, the more you do with other people, the more you do with your other citizens of your town, the more you unlock and the more enriched and wonderful your experience is. So that's everything. This is a really high-level talk. I hope this helps get you started, but the rest is up to you, just like Tom Nook says. I'm sure that you can find your own ways of having fun and living your best life. Please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or on the Discord if you have any questions. I'll also be posting my slides. And again, if you want my really cute IBM hat, that's also on my Twitter and it will be on the swag page. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Mia. That was one, very well put together and educational, and two, it was adorable. So I want to remind people that you can ask questions in the Discord speaker Q&A channel. But if there's currently not any questions, but I think this happens to me sometimes when I talk about like community or maybe more when they're sort of like more emotionally intelligent talks, you don't often get a lot of questions because folks sometimes don't know how to ask like until they're in the middle of maybe like an issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to get your thoughts on something I learned recently, which is called, I'm sure it's from someone who's like famous and lots of people know about it, but it was new to me. And it was called taking the L, which is that if you mess up as a community member, you should apologize and move on, like, and not try to make it about you and your mistake. And I was wondering if you'd heard of that or if you had any thoughts about it, which is
Yeah, I don't know that I've heard about it specifically, but it makes a lot of sense to me just from what you're saying, because it's the focus as a community should never be on I did this wrong and I need to drag it out and make it this big long thing, right? So it makes sense to me that if there is a conflict or there is something like that, uh, just apologize, make sure you right your wrongs, but let's not dwell on it forever.
yeah. Ooh, we had a question come in. So one issue I've experienced with online communities is text communication. Emotion in
Yes.
meeting is hard to convey sometimes, whether that's in queries, issues, or even apologies. How important is verbal and video communication to maintain online communities?
That's such a great question. I think that's absolutely the challenge with digital communities. I think that if you have a voice chat function or a video chat function, that definitely helps. But more importantly, try to read your message as if you're someone without any context before you send it. Because sometimes I catch my own messages being like, oh, if I didn't know what I was trying to say, I would think this was aggressive for no reason or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Try
Yeah.
to really clarify the tone. I'm a big fan of emojis. I think they help a lot.
Yeah.
So you can have fun with it. You know, you don't have to be super stiff.
Mhm.
And if you are able to create that video and voice channel, that helps, but that's not always possible depending on what community it is. So really, it's just about making sure that you are communicating the way that you mean to as best as possible. Um, and if you're on the other side of it, you read something and you're like, wow, this person's aggressive or this person is coming across this way. Try to clarify with them because they probably didn't mean it that way. That's what I mean about leading with empathy, assuming the best of people, because they probably aren't coming in out of nowhere, you know, swinging punches.
Right. So we do have a question from the Twitch chat. Do you have any special tips for building communities in a more corporate context?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah, let me see if there's anything I would do differently. I think the big thing, especially working for IBM as such a very big company, is trying to bridge into communities you don't usually talk to. We can be very siloed. It can be difficult to make sure that you're reaching out to all the right people. Maybe you're in marketing or you're in on the engineering team and you don't talk to people in a different department ever. If you're creating a community, you want to make sure you can, to the best of your ability, reach out and reach everybody who could be a part of that community. I think that's the main thing I would change for that. Just making it accessible for people in that way. Like maybe I know IBM, we have like 1,000 different Slack workspaces. So if you create a channel for your community, maybe make sure that it's in one of the global Slack channels rather than one that's specific to a workspace. Things like that. Just try to be really able to reach out. Everything else I think still applies though.
Yeah, I think so. So now the questions are coming in now that people know. We'll do one more on stream and then we'll probably have to cut after that. But this one I am very excited to hear the answer to. How do you deal with social burnout? I notice every time I've been a mod or community leader in a digital community, checking on the community posts felt like a chore really quickly, which rarely happens as a normal user. And is there an expectation to always be on as a community organizer?
Oh, that's a great question. To me, the first thing I think about is that feels like you don't have enough support. It feels like you don't have enough people that are helping you moderate, especially depending on the size of the community. It could be that you just need more hands on deck. I don't think you should be expected to have 24/7 moderation of that community because, you know, everyone's got to sleep, everyone's got personal time. So I think it starts with maybe reaching out and asking for more help. It could also be good to schedule some time where you specifically aren't checking in on it. Or if you can, say, okay, I'll do an hour of moderation in the morning and an hour in the evening, or however much time you have to give to it. But really setting those clear boundaries and making sure that you're able to take a break when you need it. It also might just be that building a community is not what you want to do. And I don't know that that's the answer you want to hear in that context, but you know, it might not be for you. You may just want to be a very active community member rather than having the responsibility of making sure everyone else is having a good time and getting that value out of the community because it is difficult. But yeah, I think the first thing to think about is, do you have enough support? And the second thing is to try to build those boundaries and see if that helps.
Yeah, I think that's a really great answer. It can be really hard when you love your community to set boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, there is a little bit of convo in the speaker Q&A channel, but I want to thank you all for your questions. And also I would like everyone to give a very warm thank you to Mia for sharing their experiences.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much. Now I walk up to the podium. I have to say it or else I forget to do it.